What's up, everyone? This is Lucas Ross Sports, and you're watching our Lucas Ross Sports channel. We continue our college football playoff standings / projections after week number 4 of the 2022 college football season. Basically, this is the top 4 standings. Basically, each and every week I give you my top 4 teams. These are based off of how the top 4 teams played. And of course, we'll have a new top 4 each and every single week sometimes. Sometimes it stays the same. Looking back to last week, I had Georgia still at number 1. I had Alabama at number 2. Number 3 was Ohio State. And I had Michigan at number 4. I had Georgia winning the national championship if those games were to happen. So pretty much, we have a lot of changes, though, into this top 4 after week number 4. I mean, pretty much it's a big change. Not a big change. It's still the top 4 teams from last week, and they've been pretty much the same top 4, I think, ever since week number 2. And I think week number 1, I had Clemson at number 4, and that's been pretty much the difference there, each and every single week. But let's get right into it here with our college football playoff top 4 standings after week number 4. And this is how the semifinals will play out. These first semifinal matchup, the number 1 versus number 4 seed will be at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And then the number 2 seed versus number 3 seeded will be at the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. I kept saying the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, so now I got the Verbo Fiesta Bowl now. That is where the game will be played at in the semifinals. We still got a long way to go before we really get into the college football playoff rankings. Those will come in November, but this season does fly by. Let's get started here with the number 1 overall seed. And we do have a change here. We have a new number 1 team, and that's Alabama. Alabama comes in at number 1. Pretty much, I think they really outperformed Georgia last weekend. You look at the game against Vanderbilt, they dominated that game from the start. There was no question about it. Alabama looked like a different football team than we've seen in the Texas game. And like I said, I think the Texas game was a bit of a fluke for Alabama. And yes, I think they still, have a shot to maybe be one of the top teams and one of the top offenses in the SEC. Alabama, though, they're number 1 here this week. And as you saw my New Year's 6 bowl predictions, I didn't get out the college football playoff New Year's 6 bowls because I wanted to save it right here for this video. But Alabama's number 1. Let's go to the number 2 seed, and that is going to be Ohio State. Ohio State with a big win over Wisconsin last weekend. Well, Ohio State's offense, I'm still calling this, team the most dangerous offense in the country. And pretty much they're looking like that right now. I know that Notre Dame game, they didn't really show that game, but Notre Dame was actually a good defensive team. And now they're starting to get better as well. I mean, after an 0-2 start, we're here to talk about Ohio State. Ohio State, though, they're getting better as a team. They're undefeated, and they had to play the Rutgers at home, which the Rutgers have been pretty good so far. They're coming off that loss to Iowa at home. I think it should be an easy, pretty win there for Ohio State, as they are now number 2 here. Let's go to the number 3 seed, and it's going to be Georgia. Georgia, of course, had a pretty flat performance against Kent State, and yes, I had to move them down 2 spots just because of the performance. Based on the performance that I saw from Georgia this past weekend, I had to move them down. I had to move them down to, number 3, and they will play Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl if this game were to happen. Yes, I think Georgia just didn't bring their A game in that one. I think, against Kent State, it was a real competition. They overlooked that team, and they were just pretty much focused on the game next weekend. I think it was against Missouri, which they do play them this Saturday. So I think Georgia was pretty much focused on the next opponent, and after, beating, of course, all these other teams by, a big margin, that's the first, game that Georgia's had, pretty much a tough competition. But they're number 3 here. And let's go to the number 4 seed, who will play Alabama in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And you probably already guessed it. It's going to be Michigan. Michigan still remains at number 4. Now, it was a tough call for the number 4 seed this week. I probably would have put in Clemson, maybe perhaps USC. But from what we saw with USC, they only won by 3. And then you had, of course, Michigan, not performing well against Maryland, but they still won that game. And you had Clemson with a close call there against Wake Forest. I probably would have put in Clemson here at number 4, but Michigan, though, I think they're still the better offensive team like they have been so far this year. But Michigan, they had a pretty tough performance against Maryland. I knew that game was going to be close. I knew that game would be close, but I knew Michigan would come out on top in the later part of the game. It turned out to be a great finish in that one. All right, let's get to the projections now. If these games were to happen, if I was going to make a prediction on these games, if in the Alabama versus Michigan game, in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, if I was going to make a prediction on this one, I would go with the Crimson Tide. I would go with Crimson Tide because of the offense. I think the offense is just much stronger than Michigan's. I think the defense will be better by that time if this game were to happen as well. Michigan's defense is pretty young, but I think their defense is off to a great start this year, but I think Michigan will come up short in this one. And I got Alabama moving on to the national championship. Now, the semifinals was a tough one to call between Ohio State and Georgia, but last weekend, from what I saw with Ohio State's offense, they were dangerous, and what I saw with Georgia's offense, they weren't really that explosive, and the defense just kind of gave up a lot of points. And I'm going to say that Ohio State does defeat Georgia in this semifinal matchup in the Fiesta Bowl. And it will be a close one, and don't get me wrong, it will be a close game if this game were to happen, but I think Ohio State would be able to come out on top in the end. And it's Alabama versus Ohio State in a national championship. Now, if you saw my preseason predictions, I did predict Alabama versus Ohio State to play in the national championship this season. If you go back and watch my predictions, I did have Alabama, Ohio State, Utah, and Georgia as my top 4 teams, as a college football playoff bracket. But right now, Utah is sitting there with 1 loss, so I might be wrong on Utah, but I could still be right with these top 4 teams. But Alabama versus Ohio State in the national championship, who do I think wins it here? It's going to be an offensive battle. I think Alabama has the better defense in this game. I'm going to say Alabama wins the national championship if they do play this game and if it were to happen. I'm not saying this is an official prediction. This is a simply projection that I think what will happen, but it's not pretty much guaranteed until we get into the month of November. I mean, all these college football playoff rankings don't come out until the month of November, and it's still pretty much it's now October. We're getting really close though to the month of November, and it's going to be a pretty wide open season. This season has already been wide open, to be honest. I mean, these are just crazy games that have been happening. And also, the upsets keep happening as well. But Alabama is my national champion here in week number 4, or actually week number 5 after week number 4. I pretty much had Georgia, I think, winning it 3 times in a row in all these videos. So I think Alabama pretty much is the favorite, if they, had a college football playoff game the next week. So Alabama, I had them winning the national championship in my projections, and that concludes my top 4 standings / projections for the college football playoff for the 2022 season. And stay tuned here for more on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.